Welcome to a special edition of Legal AF. I'm joined again by Senator Doug Jones. There's so many things our audience needs to have clarity on concerning the U.S. attorney confirmation process that we're seeing being abused by Donald Trump and his Department of Justice. We're learning about things that we may have either didn't learn in grade school or we'll have to learn again, like what are the blue slip protocols in the Senate as it relates to judges, as it relates to U.S. attorneys. Why is it that we are 6 months into this administration and not one U.S. attorney has been confirmed for Donald Trump? Does he care? Should we care? And also in 6 months, although that may change on Thursday, not one federal judge has been confirmed in the first 6 months of this administration either. I think they're all sort of tied together, and I can't think of anybody better to sort of extricate us from the situation and explain it than Senator Doug Jones. Doug, thanks for joining and briefing our audience again.
Always a pleasure being with you, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's kick it off. We know just the highlights, right? We've got U.S. attorneys that are so far to the right politically into the world of MAGA that on their nominations, they're getting opposed by the by the senators in the blue states primarily. We had an example in New York. We have an example in New Jersey. We have another example in Nevada. And Habba, the New Jersey one, Sacronia guy up in the Northern District of New York. And then we've got Sigal Chattah, who constantly runs for office in Nevada, is a right-wing Republican who's been nominated to be the U.S. attorney for the District of Nevada. And they've reached various roadblocks having to do with, for the position they're being appointed for, the senators of those states are not supporting it. And what happens there? Donald Trump having come up with different ways to do a workaround. Some he's submitted to the Senate, some he's withdrawn, some he's using another provision of the U.S. Constitution. Let's catch up. First big picture question. Why is the Senate confirmation of a U.S. attorney, why is that so fundamental to our system of justice, that it's that important that we're in watching the abuse of it by Donald Trump matters?
Well, you know, the United States attorneys, and I was honored to have been a United States attorney under President Clinton. And the United States attorneys they do represent the Department of Justice. They are the leading federal law enforcement official in their particular district. There are 93 federal districts in this country. And each district has their own United States attorney, all that have to be nominated by the president, confirmed by the United States Senate. And they represent the department, but they're really representing the agencies. It's a criminal prosecutor that prosecutes the federal crimes in that district, but you also represent the client agencies. You know, in Alabama, for instance, I represented not just the Veterans Affairs. I had NASA up in North Alabama. I had the Army. I had others that were client agencies that we represented. So it's an incredibly important position in each district because there's so much that the federal government and the United States has in their representation. So that's number one. Now, historically, Michael, the U.S. attorneys are lawyers that of some credibility. I'm trying not to put myself in this category, but they were lawyers of some credibility with some credentials.
I'll put you in that category, okay. Senator Jones.
I appreciate it. That are not going to draw some kind of ire from the other side. Everybody, because you've got a job to do and you're a lawyer and you're representing the United States. So historically, U.S. attorney nominations go through a process. They're vetted by the Department of Justice in the White House. They're vetted by the Judiciary Committee. And most of these are done by unanimous consent at the committee level. Then they're put on the floor by unanimous consent and they're confirmed. That's just the way it goes. It's a list. What we're seeing now is really an anomaly in U.S. attorneys because this president is appointing folks that are so far to the right, that are so beholden to his political agenda, not just the rule of law. In fact, some of them I question whether they're dedicated to the rule of law at all, that we're seeing blocks being put on. And the Senate can do that in one of two ways. They can delay a process and not have unanimous consent and make the committees and make the floor action go through the hoops of hours of debate, then a vote to cut off debate, which requires only a majority at this point. It's not a 60 vote threshold. Or in the case of the Judiciary Committee, they have a long-standing tradition called the blue slip. And that every time a nomination for a United States attorney, a United States marshal, or a United States district judge is nominated, then the chairman of judiciary will send a blue slip to that state's home senators. And the home senators have to sign off on that and send their blue slip back in order for the chairman of judiciary to have a hearing to bring that nomination up to the committee. You can send that blue slip back with a positive recommendation, or no recommendation, or an adverse recommendation, or, as in the case, what we're seeing happening more and more, they're just not sending the blue slip back, which means that if the chairman is going to honor that process, he doesn't hold a hearing at all. The nomination is just stuck in limbo. And so it began to happen more and more, I think, with U.S. attorneys and others during the Biden administration, where red state senators would hold their blue slips. Alabama, for instance, under the Biden administration, never had we've got 3 districts, and we never had a single U.S. attorney that was confirmed. We never had a single U.S. attorney whose blue slip was returned to judiciary. And by the way, Michael, it takes both. It's not one or the other. You've got to have both U.S. senators send this back. And so what we're seeing now is that Democrats are saying, hold on a minute. We're not going to allow some of these folks to go through. Find someone else. And that's why the administration is trying to come up with all other ways to get around the law, to get around, I think, the Constitution, and certainly get around the blue slip process.
Because they don't want to find somebody else. All they need to do is find somebody else that's more moderate, that's more acceptable. That's the reason for that chamber. But they don't want to do that.
And by the way, they are doing that in some places. For instance, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner have signed off on somebody in Virginia to be the U.S. attorney, which they're actually very high on. There's some folks that I know are in the running to be the U.S. attorney in Birmingham, Alabama, which I would support because I've known them for a long time. So it does happen, but yet we still see in important places, Ed Martin, who was originally the U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia, he was the interim and was nominated. Fortunately, enough people raised enough questions about not his qualifications, but the fact that he disqualified himself, with his antics and holding up white supremacists and giving them honors, that Tillis and others, Republicans, said, no, we can't do this.
I mean,
and the nomination.
The main fight is that Donald Trump wants to pick a fight in blue states or in battleground states like Nevada, New York, New Jersey, and in other places, because he wants to, as Alina Habba said, turn these blue states red.
That's right.
He wants a loyalist who's going to do his political hack job and not. You think Alina Habba's ever read or intends to read the Department of Justice manual?
No, I doubt.
Or any of these people?
Yeah, no. Their manual is whatever Donald Trump says.
Exactly.
And you're absolutely right. It's interesting that the farthest right are going into places that are the bluest states. You're not putting folks like that in Alabama,
right? And so we see the political game for what it is. And then you have Bondi or whoever is guiding them, whoever the brain trust is there, maybe John Sauer in the Solicitor General's office, giving them the advice that they can then go pick through the Constitution, find language about special attorneys, which we always interpreted as as the special counsel, independent counsel that were used, like Jack Smith, that didn't need Senate confirmation. They said, oh, look at this language. Special attorney. We'll make him a special attorney, or Alina Habba, or this other person, and we will give them all the powers of a U.S. attorney and give them an indefinite appointment. How is that not a violation of the Constitution? And more importantly, when are the public interest groups going to file their cases to challenge these invalidly appointed U.S. attorneys?
Yeah, no, I think you're going to start seeing that. I think at this point, so far, most of these appointments have been interim U.S. attorneys, and they have a shelf life at the end of, like, I think it's 120 days. And at the end of the time, that if they're not confirmed, then the district court gets to appoint. Now, frankly, Michael, I've always thought that was a little bit of a conflict, that the judicial branch can appoint a U.S. attorney.
Right.
But that's what the law says. And so they're trying to get around that with special attorneys. Those have been used for a long time, but not as United States attorneys, not as supervisors, not as the district. When I was in the middle of prosecuting the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing cases when President Clinton left office and George W. Bush came into office. We were trying our first case in April of 2001. I had been the lead lawyer on that. Well, before that case, there was a concerted effort to try to remove all Clinton United States attorneys. Mm-hmm. And I got a call saying that they wanted to do that with me. But they told me that they would make me a special attorney. And I said, that's just horseshit. I'm not going to do that. Okay. I said, it's a legal term. I said, that is just, you cannot do that. This has been a case that the United States attorney and the power of that and the prestige of that office has brought this case. And I've worked with the victims, and I've worked with the witnesses, and I've worked with law enforcement. You cannot then relegate. It's not the person, it's the office. Yeah. And don't do that. I will go out kicking and screaming if that's the case. And fortunately, they didn't. My friend Bill Pryor, who was the Alabama Attorney General at the time, went to bat for me. He was Republican Attorney General, now in the 11th Circuit, and said, no, just leave him in place. Because I told him, I said, look, I'm leaving. Mr. Ashcroft, I'm not going to work for you. That's fine. I'm going to be leaving, but let me do this one case, and then I'll work it out later on. And that's what happened. So special attorneys, it should be a non-starter.
Yeah.
A presidentially appointed, nominated, and confirmed by the United States Senate is what every district needs for that, to bring the cachet, to bring the power, to bring the prestige of the United States government to it, because it's more than just prosecutions. It is community service. It's civil cases. There's a lot to the job.
And we have our first motion, as I had thought would come, from a defense lawyer who's challenging Alina Habba and saying, you're illegally appointed. You're unconstitutionally appointed. My client has the right to be prosecuted again by somebody in the office led by somebody who's properly appointed and confirmed, or picked by the federal judges under that statute we just talked about. Mm-hmm. You don't fit the bill. My client's indictment should be dismissed. That's been filed now. As you're aware, Doug, it got referred because every judge, 17 judges, voted against Alina Habba to put Desiree Grayson, a career prosecutor, in that role. I still recognize her as the duly appointed interim U.S. attorney for New Jersey, and so it had to be referred out through the Third Circuit Court of Appeals chief judge. And he picked somebody in the Middle District of Pennsylvania, also in the Third Circuit, who's sitting almost by designation in New Jersey to handle this motion. Right. What do you think about those motions? And then back into the Nevada. I know you want to talk about the Nevada person who's been appointed, who I don't know if he's going to do it through a confirmation process and try to shove her through over the blue slips, or he's going to try to do this end run around with the special attorney classification.
Yeah, in the case of New Jersey, I think you're going to. That's the first of many motions. Remember, folks need to know that every indictment that is returned in a district has the name of the United States attorney. Yes, the odds are that that United States attorney didn't physically go into the grand jury and present the indictment or the evidence. And there's an assistant U.S. attorney that's done that. But it's under the authority of the United States attorney. That is the presidentially appointed. That is the statutory or constitutional office holder to bring indictments. It's not the AUSA. And so I think you're going to see more and more of these challenges in districts like this. I think she's going to continue to be challenged because, even in the case of special attorneys, the U.S. attorney's name has to appear. And if they're I don't know the right term. If it's an illegal appointment, if they're sitting, I don't know, maybe it's just a hoax, Michael, that let's use the Trump term. Maybe it's just a hoax that she's the U.S. attorney. I don't know, but I think you're going to see more. There's going to have to be challenges, I think, to this, and they're going to have to do some gymnastics. Nevada is going to be an interesting one because I do not see, based on the press reports that I've seen, that you will find that Jackie Rosen or Catherine Cortez Masto, who Catherine was, by the way, a former attorney general of Nevada. So she's got that prosecutorial experience. I don't think that they're going to send in a blue slip on the president's nomination. And so we'll see how that happens. Sometimes interims can stay for a long time if nobody really challenges it with the court. But it looks like that these folks are going to be challenged left and right.
Yeah, he's going to end up like the end of his 4-year term with like a third of his U.S. attorneys actually properly confirmed. If I had to make a bet, right?
Yeah, and it's silly to do that because the Department of Justice representatives in a district are not going to, it's so different. You've got things going on in that district that demands attention. And that is not, all that we're seeing from the Department of Justice right now, the controversy is swirling around the folks at the top in what we call main justice. Those U.S. attorneys need guidance. The assistants need guidance. The local agents on the ground that are doing the work every day in this country to prosecute crimes, both violent and nonviolent crimes, they need that guidance from a United States attorney. So it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to have these just absolute crazy right-wingers to try to do crazy things in blue states. You need somebody that's going to uphold the law.
Well, we have a Trump administration and Donald Trump who doesn't respect the Department of Justice, doesn't respect his own attorney general or federal judges. They just filed a ethics complaint against Judge Boasberg after he said he's going to make a referral of Department of Justice lawyers in front of him to their state bar grievance committees for possible disciplinary action. They said, "Oh, well, we'll beat you to it. We'll do an ethics charge against you." Let's talk about judges to round out this briefing to our audience. Because blue slips, which is the common theme for this episode, play a slightly different role depending upon trial court level judges, district court level judges, and appellate court level judges. This week on Thursday, we have the vote with limited debate. Cloture was invoked. Limited debate on the Senate floor, on the full floor of the Senate, on Emil Bovey, Donald Trump's personal criminal defense lawyer. And I wrote it down because you said something in an earlier video that we did. This is somebody who Todd Blanche, his former law partner and buddy, said about him in an op-ed piece to the Fox News in the last week or two to support his candidacy, that Emil Bovey was Trump's warrior in the Department of Justice. And that, for me, that's like a disqualifier to be an independent federal judge.
Absolutely.
But for them, it's like, hey, he's going to be, can you imagine him on the third, anything that comes up from the Trump administration? I can already write the opinion. So he's going to have that vote this week, although I'm going to do a report soon. A third whistleblower has come out against him as we came on the air. Talk about blue slips as it relates, because I don't want to. Alina Habba is her as a concept is difficult to kill with Donald Trump. And could he say, well, I can't get her in as a U.S. attorney? How about an appellate court judge or a
Well,
Supreme Court judge?
yeah, no, look, they are different. And at one point, blue slips applied to appellate judges as well as district judges. Because in the appellate courts, every federal appellate court in this country, it has more than one state that is a part of it. And so there are slots for the different states so that they'd make, like in the 11th Circuit, you've got Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. And each state has some slots on the 11th Circuit so that the states are fairly represented on the court. And at one point, the blue slips would apply to everybody. Well, they don't apply to appellate courts anymore. They're still being recognized for district court judges, which, frankly, I have mixed emotions about the blue slip, quite frankly, because they're used sometimes, especially with judges, to just hold off and stop. We had 2 appointments. We've got 2 vacancies in Alabama. One has been vacant since 2020. Okay. A district court. We got another one that's been vacant since 2022. And it's because the senators would not send a blue slip in for anybody that whose name came forward from the White House. And we're creating red and blue judiciary by doing that. And we're not getting these judges that are somewhat they're compromised judges in the sense that they're acceptable to everyone. You may not like everything they do, but they're at least acceptable and their qualifications are there. That doesn't apply to appellate courts. It's why Emil Bovee is where he is. He could never have made it as a district court if he lives in New York. Because Schumer and Gillibrand would have never put him on the bench.
Yeah, that's the reason they skipped over making him that judge and put him on a court he's not qualified for.
So any of the folks that you see getting bumped because they are too far to the right, two Donald Trump lackeys, could end up more than likely on an appellate court unless they happen to live in a truly red state where both U.S. senators are just essentially rubber stamps for whatever the president is going to put in front of them.
Talk about failing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their reward for being unqualified is they get to be at a higher level in the court system.
It's really amazing that with what I'm seeing, because judges of this, with these problems, with these ethical issues that Bovee has had, with disdain for the federal courts that Bovee has had, if you would flip the script, and an Obama nominee or a Biden nominee had basically told a group of Department of Justice lawyers to just don't worry about it. Just, the federal judges that handle this can go screw themselves, using much more profane terms than that. They would have been up in arms. They would have been absolutely, they would have had tiki torches out, trying to burn them at the stake, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And so I'm really, I just know that deep down there's some people in that U.S. Senate that's got to be cringing when they do this. And I wish they would just decide to go back to their role as a public servant and do the right thing in only these. And knowing that even doing that, overwhelming number of Trump judges will be confirmed. They should be confirmed because they don't have that kind of agenda. They may be conservative, but that's not the test.
Yeah, I'm okay
the
with
test
that.
is whether they've got a political agenda that is not going to do nothing but support the president.
He's going to have 200 or more judges that he's going to be able to fill. Hopefully they won't try to expand, and the midterms will stop that, any expansion of the federal judiciary. Let's leave the briefing on a hopeful note for our audience. Are you hopeful that if the Democrats take back the presidency in 2028 and one or both chambers at the midterms or beyond, that the damage that Donald Trump is doing to the reputation of the Department of Justice, to the federal judiciary, can be healed by a term or two under the other party's control?
I am. I'm very hopeful. I think it's going to be difficult, though, because the Department of Justice has now been so politicized that you're going to have to get some buy-in from the other side of the aisle in order to do that. A Democrat can't just come in there and do what Donald Trump is doing. They can't do that from just a different political agenda. You know, I have this theory that in politics is like Newton's third law of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Democrats cannot do that. We cannot have an equal and opposite reaction to this. We've got to try to build some norms back into this system. And that means getting some buy-in from folks that are in the Senate. You'll never get buy-in from the MAGA right, but you can get buy-in from some more institutional Republicans out there. And that builds credibility. It is not just about winning. It's about some institutional credibility that is shot.
And let's get some institutionalist and credible statesmen and statespeople like people in the Senate. I mean, Roy Cooper.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing.
Absolutely.
That's a good thing.
It's a great thing. Roy Cooper. I'm telling you, I said it before, and you can hear it. They're talking about how that's changing. Put North Carolina in the Democratic's corner. Roy Cooper is that kind of public servant.
Yeah.
Put North Carolina in the corner. Yeah. For the Democrats.
Agreed. Senator Doug Jones, bringing to bear all of your Senate knowledge, your body of work, including as a U.S. attorney here in briefing our audience on Legal AF. From the bottom of my heart and our audience, really appreciate you being here. And regularly, this is, I know, a new home for you, regularly appearing with us on Legal AF. Thanks again. And from Michael Popok, shout out to the Mightiest Mighty and the Legal AFers. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touches Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event, by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states, and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.